The rain hammered against the windows of the modest craftsman home on Maple Street in Portland, Oregon. As Seraphina Ashcroft sat at her kitchen table, nursing a cup of chamomile tea that had long gone cold. At 52 years old, she had weathered many storms in her life, but nothing could have prepared her for the phone call that would shatter everything she thought she knew about her family. The voice on the other end of the line was trembling, elderly, and thick with what sounded like decades of guilt. "Mrs. Ashcroft, my name is Catherine Brennan. I was a night shift nurse at St. Vincent's Hospital 18 years ago. I need to tell you something that I should have said a long time ago." Seraphina's hand tightened around her teacup. St. Vincent's. That was where she had given birth to her daughter, Rosalind, on a snowy February night in 2007. The memory was still vivid, despite the passage of time. The fluorescent lights of the delivery room, the exhaustion that had seeped into her bones after 23 hours of labor. The first cry of her newborn daughter that had made every moment of pain worthwhile. "What is this about?" Seraphina asked, her voice steady despite the sudden acceleration of her heartbeat. There was a long pause, filled only by the sound of ragged breathing. Then, the words that would change everything. "Your baby was switched at the hospital. The daughter you took home that night wasn't the child you gave birth to." The teacup slipped from Seraphina's fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor in a spray of ceramic and tepid liquid. For a moment, she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what she had just heard. It was impossible, absurd, some kind of cruel joke or scam. "That's not possible," she finally managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "I held my baby. I nursed her. I've raised her for 18 years. I know how this sounds," Catherine continued, her words tumbling out faster now, as if she had rehearsed this confession 1,000 times and needed to get through it before she lost her courage. "But it's true. There was another baby born that same night, just 2 hours after yours. The mother's name was Patricia Hartwell. I was exhausted, working a double shift because another nurse had called in sick. When I took the babies to the nursery for their checkups, I mixed up the identification bracelets. By the time I realized what I had done, both families had already taken their babies home." Seraphina felt the room spinning around her. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white. "Why are you telling me this now? Why didn't you say something 18 years ago?" The sob that came through the phone line was raw and anguished. "I was terrified. I had just started at St. Vincent's 6 months earlier. I had student loans, a mother with Alzheimer's who depended on my income for her care facility. I convinced myself that it didn't matter, that both babies were healthy and going to good homes, that knowing the truth would only cause pain. But I was wrong. I've been wrong every single day for 18 years, and now I'm dying. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors say I have 3 months at most. I can't face whatever comes next without making this right." Seraphina's mind raced through 18 years of memories. Rosalind's first steps, her first day of kindergarten, the soccer games and piano recitals, the arguments about curfews and college applications. Every moment they had shared, every laugh and tear and late-night conversation. How could none of it be real? How could the girl she had raised, the daughter she loved more than life itself, not actually be her biological child? "Does Patricia Hartwell know?" Seraphina asked, her voice hollow. "I called her first this morning. She hung up on me. But I had to try. I had to tell you both the truth, even if you hate me for it. I've kept detailed records, hospital documents that I shouldn't have kept but did. I can prove everything I'm saying. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Ashcroft. I'm so deeply, truly sorry." After Catherine provided her contact information and hung up, Serafina sat in the wreckage of her shattered teacup, unable to move. Outside, the storm continued its assault on the city, but she barely noticed. Her entire world had just been upended, and she had no idea how to make sense of it. Rosalind was supposed to come home from her freshman year at the University of Washington for spring break the following week. How could Serafina possibly look at her daughter and not see her differently now? How could she tell Rosalind the truth? And should she? That night, Serafina didn't sleep. She sat in Rosalind's childhood bedroom, surrounded by the artifacts of 18 years. The walls were still painted the soft lavender they had chosen together when Rosalind was 12. Photographs covered every surface, a visual timeline of a life that suddenly felt like a lie. Rosalind at 3 years old, gap-toothed and grinning. Rosalind at 10, holding her first-place ribbon from the science fair. Rosalind at 16, dressed for prom in an emerald green dress that brought out the hazel flecks in her brown eyes. Those eyes. Serafina had always wondered about them. Her own eyes were blue, as had been her late husband Michael's. They had been told that recessive genes could explain the difference, that it wasn't uncommon. But now she knew the truth. Rosalind had brown eyes because she wasn't their biological child. As dawn broke over Portland, painting the sky in shades of gray and pink, Serafina made a decision. She couldn't keep this information to herself, but she also couldn't drop this bomb on Rosalind without knowing more. She needed to verify Catherine's story, to understand the full scope of what had happened. And she needed to meet Patricia Hartwell and the girl who should have been her daughter. The next morning, Serafina called her sister Vivian, the only person she trusted with something this monumental. Vivian had always been her rock, especially after Michael had died from complications of diabetes 5 years ago, leaving Serafina to navigate single parenthood during Rosalind's turbulent high school years. "You need to slow down and take a breath," Vivian said after Serafina had explained everything in a rush. "This woman could be lying, or confused, or trying to scam you somehow." "She sent me documents," Serafina replied, pulling up the email Catherine had sent at 4 in the morning. "Hospital records, photographs of the identification bracelets, a signed confession. It's all here, Vivian, and it all checks out." Vivian was silent for a long moment. "What are you going to do?" "I need to meet Patricia Hartwell and her daughter. I need to see for myself." Finding Patricia Hartwell proved easier than Serafina had expected. A quick search of public records revealed that she lived in Beaverton, a suburb just outside Portland, in a house worth approximately $850,000, according to the most recent property assessment. Further investigation showed that Patricia was a corporate attorney at Morrison and Associates, one of the most prestigious law firms in the Pacific Northwest. She was married to Gregory Hartwell, a cardiovascular surgeon at Providence St. Vincent Medical Center, ironically, the same hospital system where the switch had occurred. Serafina drafted and deleted a dozen emails before finally settling on something simple and direct. She introduced herself, mentioned Catherine Brennan's confession, and requested a meeting to discuss the situation. She hit send before she could second-guess herself, then spent the next 2 days in an agony of waiting. The response came on a Wednesday afternoon. It was terse, almost hostile. "Ms. Ashcroft, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but I suggest you stop immediately. My family is not interested in participating in whatever scheme this is. If you continue to contact us, I will pursue legal action for harassment." The rejection stung, but Serafina wasn't surprised. If their positions were reversed, if some stranger had contacted her with an impossible claim that threatened to upend her entire life, she might have reacted the same way. But Serafina couldn't let it go. The truth was the truth, whether Patricia wanted to acknowledge it or not. she decided to take a different approach. Through a contact at the hospital where Michael had been treated, she managed to get the name of the administrator who had oversight of the maternity ward. She arranged a meeting and brought Catherine's documentation with her. The administrator, a severe woman named Dr. Ellen Cho, reviewed the documents with a clinical detachment that Serafina found both reassuring and deeply unsettling. After nearly an hour of silence, broken only by the rustle of papers and the clicking of Dr. Cho's computer keyboard, the administrator finally looked up. "This is extraordinarily serious," Dr. Cho said. "If what these documents suggest is true, we're looking at one of the most significant medical errors in the history of this hospital. I'll need to open a formal investigation, which means contacting both families involved. You understand that this will become public once that happens?" Serafina nodded, even though the thought terrified her. "I just need to know the truth, and I need my daughter to know the truth, whatever that truth turns out to be." The investigation took 3 weeks. It involved DNA testing that Serafina agreed to provide, subpoenaed hospital records, and interviews with everyone who had worked at St. Vincent's maternity ward on that February night in 2007. Catherine Brennan was interviewed extensively, despite her deteriorating health. By the end of it, there was no doubt. The DNA results were conclusive. Rosalind was not Serafina's biological daughter. The hospital's legal team reached out to both families simultaneously. This time, Patricia Hartwell couldn't ignore the truth. The DNA test they had conducted on her daughter, a girl named Charlotte, confirmed that she was Serafina's biological child. The meeting was arranged in a neutral location, a conference room at the hospital's administrative building. Serafina arrived early, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She had spent hours agonizing over what to wear, finally settling on a simple navy dress and minimal jewelry. She wanted to appear professional, stable, like someone who could handle this impossible situation with grace. Patricia Hartwell arrived precisely on time, which somehow didn't surprise Serafina. She was tall and impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than Serafina's mortgage payment. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her expression was cold, guarded. Behind her was a girl who looked to be about 18, with the same dark hair as Patricia, but striking blue eyes that Serafina recognized immediately. They were Michael's eyes, the same shade of blue that Serafina saw every time she looked in the mirror. "Charlotte," Serafina whispered, not meaning to say it aloud. The girl looked uncomfortable, shifting from foot to foot. She was beautiful in a delicate way that reminded Serafina of her own mother, who had passed away when Serafina was in her 20s. There was something in the shape of her face, the curve of her jaw, that was unmistakably familiar. "Let's be clear about something," Patricia said before anyone else could speak. Her voice was crisp, professional, the voice of someone accustomed to commanding a courtroom. "We're here because the hospital insisted, and because my attorney advised me that cooperation would be in our best interest should this situation result in litigation. But that doesn't mean I accept any of this. Charlotte is my daughter. I raised her. I was there for every moment of her life. Biology is irrelevant." "Biology may not define motherhood," Serafina replied, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "But it does matter. Not because it changes who raised whom, but because both our daughters deserve to know the truth about where they come from." "Don't they deserve that?" Charlotte spoke for the first time, her voice soft but firm. "I want to know the truth. I've always felt like something was off, like I didn't quite fit in my own family. Everyone said it was normal teenage stuff, but it was more than that. When Mom told me about this, about you, it actually made sense." Patricia's expression tightened. "Charlotte, we don't need to discuss this now." "Yes, we do," Charlotte said, and Seraphina saw a flash of defiance in her daughter's eyes that she recognized from her own youth. I have a right to know who I am, where I really came from. The meeting lasted for 2 hours. It was painful, awkward, filled with long silences and carefully worded questions. They agreed to take things slowly, to arrange supervised meetings between Seraphina and Charlotte, and between Patricia and Rosalind, once Rosalind had been told the truth. That was the part that terrified Seraphina most. She had to tell Rosalind that her entire life had been built on a mistake, that the woman who had raised her wasn't her biological mother, that somewhere out there was another family she was supposed to have been part of. Rosalind came home the following weekend, her car packed with laundry and complaints about her overbearing roommate. She was full of energy and stories about campus life, about the environmental science class she was taking, and the protests she had joined against a proposed pipeline. Seraphina let her talk, memorizing every detail, knowing that this might be the last time things felt normal between them. That evening, after dinner, Seraphina asked Rosalind to sit down in the living room. She had rehearsed what she was going to say 100 times, but now that the moment was here, all her carefully chosen words evaporated. Honey, I need to tell you something, and it's going to be difficult to hear. Seraphina began, her hands trembling in her lap. Rosalind immediately looked concerned. Are you sick? Is it cancer? Oh God, Mom, just tell me. I'm not sick, Seraphina said quickly. But 18 years ago, when you were born, something happened at the hospital. Something terrible and wrong. She took a deep breath. You were switched with another baby. The daughter I brought home that night wasn't the baby I gave birth to. You weren't the baby I gave birth to. The color drained from Rosalind's face. What are you talking about? Seraphina explained everything. Catherine's confession, the investigation, the DNA tests, Charlotte and Patricia Hartwell. With each word, she watched her daughter's expression shift from confusion to disbelief to something that looked like betrayal. So you're saying I'm not your daughter? Rosalind said flatly when Seraphina had finished. You are my daughter, Seraphina insisted, reaching for Rosalind's hand, but Rosalind pulled away. You've been my daughter for 18 years. That hasn't changed. Biology doesn't change the fact that I love you more than anything in this world. But I'm not really yours, Rosalind said, standing up abruptly. I'm some stranger's kid who you've been raising by mistake. And somewhere out there is your real daughter, the one you were supposed to have. That's not how I see it. How am I supposed to process this? Rosalind's voice cracked. My entire life is a lie. Everything I thought I knew about myself, about where I came from, it's all wrong. And you've known about this for weeks and you're just telling me now? I needed to be sure, Seraphina said, tears streaming down her face. I needed to verify everything before I told you. I wanted to protect you. Well, you can't protect me from this, Rosalind shouted. You can't protect me from the fact that I don't belong anywhere now. I'm not your real daughter, and I don't know who my real parents even are. Rosalind ran upstairs and slammed her bedroom door. Seraphina heard the lock click, a sound that felt like a physical blow. She sat on the couch, her body shaking with sobs, wondering if she had just lost her daughter forever. The next few weeks were the darkest of Seraphina's life. Rosalind barely spoke to her, spending most of her time locked in her room or out with friends. When she did emerge, her eyes were red from crying, her expression distant and closed off. Seraphina tried to give her space, while also making it clear that she was there whenever Rosalind was ready to talk. But the silence between them grew thicker with each passing day. Meanwhile, Patricia Hartwell had reached out to arrange a meeting with Rosalind. Seraphina couldn't object. Rosalind had a right to know her biological family. But the thought of watching her daughter build a relationship with someone else, made her feel hollow inside. The first meeting between Rosalind and Patricia was held at a restaurant in downtown Portland. Serafina insisted on being there, positioning herself at a table on the opposite side of the dining room where she could observe without intruding. She watched as Patricia arrived, perfectly composed as always, and approached Rosalind with what looked like genuine emotion in her eyes. She couldn't hear what they were saying, but she could see Rosalind's body language slowly relax as they talked. Patricia pulled out a photo album, and they looked through it together, their heads bent close. Serafina's heart ached as she watched her daughter laugh at something Patricia said. She wanted Rosalind to be happy, to feel connected to her biological family, but it was agony to watch from the sidelines. When the lunch ended, Patricia hugged Rosalind, and Serafina saw her daughter hug back. Then Rosalind came over to where Serafina was sitting. "She's not terrible," Rosalind said quietly, sliding into the booth across from her mother. "Patricia, she's actually kind of interesting. She told me about her work, about Charlotte, about their family. She said I could come visit whenever I want, that Charlotte's excited to meet me." "That's good," Serafina managed to say. "You should get to know them." Rosalind studied her for a long moment. "You look like you're about to fall apart." "I'm fine," Serafina lied. "You're not fine. You look like you haven't slept in days." Rosalind sighed. "Look, I'm still processing all of this, and I'm still really angry and confused. But I know this isn't your fault. Catherine Brennan is the one who screwed up, not you. And you've been a good mom. You've always been a good mom. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something." Serafina felt a tiny ember of hope kindle in her chest. Her own meetings with Charlotte were more awkward. Patricia insisted on being present for the first few encounters, and her presence cast a pall over everything. Charlotte was polite but reserved, answering Serafina's questions with careful, minimal responses. It was clear that Patricia had coached her, probably warned her not to get too close to this woman who was suddenly claiming to be her real mother. But there were moments, small ones, when Serafina caught glimpses of connection. Charlotte mentioned that she loved to read, and Serafina lit up. "I loved reading at your age, too. I worked at a bookstore all through college. What kinds of books do you like?" "Historical fiction, mostly," Charlotte said, and for the first time, she smiled. "There's this series about the Tudors that I'm obsessed with. Everyone thinks it's nerdy, but I don't care." "I read those too," Serafina said. "The one about Anne Boleyn made me cry for days." Patricia cleared her throat pointedly. "Charlotte has homework to finish. We should go." But as they were leaving, Charlotte turned back and gave Serafina a small, tentative smile. It wasn't much, but it was enough to sustain Serafina through another sleepless night. The situation grew more complicated when Patricia's husband Gregory got involved. He was different from Patricia, warmer, but also more protective. He took Serafina aside at one of the meetings and spoke to her plainly. "I understand this situation is difficult for everyone," he said. "But Charlotte is my daughter in every way that matters. I was in the delivery room when Patricia gave birth. I cut the umbilical cord. I've been her father for 18 years. Whatever biology says, that's not going to change." "I'm not trying to take her away from you," Serafina said. "I just want to know her. I missed 18 years of her life. Can you understand how that feels?" Gregory's expression softened slightly. "I can try, but you need to understand that Charlotte has a family, a life, plans for her future. She's starting at Stanford in the fall. She has friends, commitments. You can't just walk in and expect her to rearrange everything for you." "I would never ask her to do that," Serafina said, even though part of her desperately wanted exactly that. wanted to reclaim all the lost time, wanted to be the center of Charlotte's world the way she should have been from the beginning. As spring turned to summer, a new rhythm established itself. Rosalind met with Patricia and Gregory regularly, slowly building a relationship with her biological family. She also spent time with Charlotte, and Serafina watched with mixed emotions as her daughter formed a bond with the girl who should have been her sister. They had coffee together, went to movies, stayed up late texting about boys and college classes and their complicated family situation. "It's weird," Rosalind told Serafina one evening. "Charlotte and I have nothing in common, but also everything in common. She gets what I'm going through in a way no one else can. She's dealing with the same mindfuck." Serafina winced at the language but couldn't argue with the sentiment. "I'm glad you have each other." "Are you, though?" Rosalind asked, her eyes searching Serafina's face. "Because sometimes you look at her like it physically hurts." Serafina couldn't lie. "It does hurt. Every time I see her, I think about all the moments I missed. Her first word, her first day of school, every birthday and Christmas. I think about the life we should have had together. But I'm also grateful that she's happy, that the Hartwells gave her a good life. It's possible to feel both things at once." Her own relationship with Charlotte progressed more slowly. Patricia's presence was a constant barrier, and Charlotte seemed unsure how to navigate the situation. But gradually, carefully, they began to find common ground. Serafina learned that Charlotte played violin, just as Serafina's mother had. Charlotte discovered that Serafina worked as a landscape architect, and she admitted that she had always loved being outdoors, that some of her happiest memories involved hiking in the Columbia River Gorge with her family. "Patricia can't understand why I like it so much," Charlotte confided during one of their meetings. "She's never been outdoorsy. She thinks I'm wasting my time when I could be studying or volunteering to build my resume." "Some people are just meant to be outside," Serafina said. "It's in our bones. My father used to take me camping every summer when I was growing up. Those were the best times of my life." Charlotte's face lit up. "I've always wanted to go camping, but Gregory is allergic to basically everything that grows, and Patricia thinks sleeping on the ground is barbaric." "Maybe we could go sometime," Serafina suggested carefully. "If you wanted to. No pressure." Charlotte considered this for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, I'd like that." When Serafina told Patricia about the camping trip proposal, the attorney's response was immediate and hostile. "Absolutely not. You're not taking my daughter into the wilderness where anything could happen." "She's 18 years old," Serafina replied, struggling to keep her voice calm. "She doesn't need your permission, but I'm asking anyway, out of respect for your role in her life. I just want to spend time with her, Patricia. That's all." "What you want is to replace me," Patricia snapped. "You want Charlotte to see you as her real mother, to undermine everything Gregory and I have built with her. Well, it's not going to work. Biology doesn't make you her mother. I am her mother, and I will protect her from anyone who threatens our family, including you." The hostility took Serafina by surprise. "I'm not trying to threaten anyone. I just want to know my daughter." "She's not your daughter," Patricia said coldly. "She never was, and she never will be. You gave birth to her, but that's where your connection ends. You should focus on Rosalind and stop trying to intrude where you don't belong." The words stung, but they also crystallized something for Serafina. She realized that Patricia was afraid. Afraid of losing Charlotte. Afraid of being replaced. Afraid that biology might matter more than 18 years of love and care. In that moment, Serafina saw Patricia not as an adversary, but as another mother trying desperately to protect her child. "I'm not trying to take her from you," Serafina said gently. But can't we both be part of her life? Can't there be room for both of us? Patricia's eyes filled with tears, though she blinked them back quickly. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to share my daughter with someone else. Neither do I, Serafina admitted. But maybe we can figure it out together. It wasn't a resolution, but it was a start. Patricia agreed to the camping trip, though she insisted on having daily check-ins. Serafina, Charlotte, and Vivian, who Serafina had asked to come along as a buffer, drove out to the coast for a weekend in late July. They set up camp on a bluff overlooking the Pacific Ocean, the sound of waves providing a constant backdrop to their conversations. Charlotte was different away from Portland, away from Patricia's watchful presence. She was more relaxed, more open. She asked Serafina questions about her childhood, about Michael, about what she had imagined her daughter would be like during those 9 months of pregnancy. I thought you'd be an artist, Serafina said, watching Charlotte roast a marshmallow over the campfire. Michael was so practical, so grounded, and I wanted our child to be different, to be creative and free-spirited and unafraid of taking risks. Instead, you got Rosalind the activist, Charlotte said with a smile. Who's all of those things and more? I did, Serafina agreed, and I'm grateful for every day I've had with her. But I also wonder what it would have been like to raise you. What kind of person you would have become if you'd grown up in my house instead of the Hartwellses. Charlotte was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. Sometimes I wonder the same thing, not because I'm unhappy with my life, but because I can't help thinking about the alternate reality where the switch never happened. Would I still play violin? Would I still want to study environmental policy? Or would I be completely different? You'd still be you, Serafina said. The essence of who we are isn't just about how we're raised. It's something deeper, something that can't be changed by circumstance. Do you really believe that? I have to, Serafina replied. Because if I believed that environment was everything, I'd have to accept that I've been raising someone else's daughter, and that my real daughter is a stranger to me. But when I look at Charlotte, I see pieces of myself, of my mother, of Michael. And when I look at Rosalind, I see the girl I've loved for 18 years, regardless of genetics. Both of those things can be true at the same time. Later that night, after Vivian had gone to sleep in one tent, and Charlotte was settled in another, Serafina sat alone by the dying fire. She thought about the past few months, about how much had changed and how much still felt uncertain. She thought about Patricia's fear and her own grief, about Rosalind's anger and Charlotte's confusion. It was a mess, a beautiful and terrible mess, and she had no idea how it would all resolve. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rosalind. How's it going with Charlotte? Serafina smiled and typed back. Good, really good. How are you? Having dinner with the Hartwells. Gregory made lasagna. It's actually pretty great. Patricia's being less weird than usual. I'm glad, honey. Love you. Love you too, Mom. That simple exchange, that easy declaration of love, was enough to remind Serafina of what mattered most. Whatever else happened, whatever complications arose from this impossible situation, Rosalind was still her daughter. Charlotte might be her daughter too, in a different way, but that didn't diminish what she and Rosalind had built together over 18 years. When they returned from the camping trip, Serafina found a letter waiting for her from Catherine Brennan. The nurse had been moved to hospice care, and her handwriting was shaky, barely legible. But the message was clear. Dear Serafina, thank you for not hating me. Thank you for trying to make something good out of my terrible mistake. I wish I could undo what I did, but since I can't, I'm grateful that both families are trying to move forward. You're a remarkable woman. Your daughters, both of them, are lucky to have you in their lives. I hope you can forgive me someday. Catherine. Serafina sat with the letter for a long time, feeling the weight of it in her hands. Forgiveness. Could she forgive the woman who had stolen 18 years from her, who had given her the wrong child and set in motion this cascade of pain and confusion? She didn't know, but she also knew that holding on to anger wouldn't change anything. Catherine was dying. Whatever punishment Serafina might wish for her was already being delivered. She wrote back, her own handwriting surprisingly steady. Catherine, I'm not ready to say I forgive you, but I don't hate you. You made a mistake, and you're paying for it. We're all paying for it. But I'm also trying to make peace with what happened, to find a way forward that honors both my daughters. I hope you can find peace too, in whatever time you have left. Serafina. 2 weeks later, Catherine Brennan died. The obituary was brief, mentioning her 45 years as a nurse and her dedication to patient care. There was no mention of the switch, of the two families whose lives she had irrevocably altered. Serafina attended the funeral, sitting in the back of a nearly empty church. Only a handful of people were there, mostly elderly colleagues from the hospital. After the service, Serafina approached the casket and placed a single white rose on top. "I hope you're at peace now," she whispered, and to her surprise, she meant it. As summer faded into fall, the four of them, Serafina, Rosalind, Patricia, and Charlotte, began meeting together for the first time. The sessions were arranged and moderated by a family therapist named Dr. Lydia Brennan, no relation to Catherine, who specialized in complicated family dynamics. Dr. Brennan created a safe space for all of them to express their feelings without judgment. During one particularly intense session, Patricia broke down completely. "I'm terrified," she admitted, her composed exterior crumbling. "Terrified that Charlotte will choose Serafina over me, that she'll decide her real family is wherever her DNA came from, and that Gregory and I will become just the people who raised her by accident." Charlotte immediately moved to her mother's side, wrapping her arms around Patricia. "That's never going to happen. You're my mom. Nothing is going to change that." "But I see how you look at Serafina," Patricia said through her tears. "I see you discovering all these things you have in common with her, and it kills me. Because I spent 18 years trying to connect with you, trying to understand why you loved hiking and camping and being outside, and I never could. She gets you in ways I never have. You don't have to understand everything about me to be my mother," Charlotte said firmly. "You've been there for every important moment of my life. You taught me how to be strong, how to stand up for myself, how to work hard and never settle for less than I deserve. Serafina didn't do those things. You did." Serafina felt her own eyes fill with tears. She hadn't realized how much she had been hoping that Charlotte would choose her, that biology would trump everything else. But hearing Charlotte's declaration of love for Patricia, she understood that it was never going to be a choice. Charlotte loved Patricia because Patricia had earned that love over 18 years. Serafina would have to find her own place in Charlotte's life, a place that didn't require diminishing what Patricia and Charlotte had together. "I'm jealous too," Serafina admitted when it was her turn to speak. "I'm jealous of every moment Patricia got to spend with Charlotte, every memory they share that I'm not part of. I'm jealous that Charlotte calls her mom without hesitation, while she still calls me Serafina. I'm jealous that Patricia knows Charlotte's favorite foods and what makes her laugh, and all the little details that I'll never know because I wasn't there." But you have those things with Rosalind, Patricia pointed out. You know every part of her. You've been her mother in every way that matters. I know, Serafina said, and I'm grateful for that. But it doesn't make me any less sad about what I lost with Charlotte. Maybe, Dr. Brennan interjected, you're all grieving for the life that should have been. Patricia and Gregory are grieving for the certainty they had before they knew about the switch. Serafina is grieving for the daughter she never got to raise, and Charlotte and Rosalind are grieving for the simplicity of knowing exactly where they came from and who they are. All of that grief is valid. Over the following months, they slowly worked through the layers of pain and resentment. There were setbacks, arguments, moments when it seemed like the whole thing would fall apart. But there were also breakthroughs, moments of genuine connection and understanding. Rosalind started calling both Serafina and Patricia by the title Mom, though she used different contexts for each. Serafina was Mom when Rosalind needed comfort or advice about personal matters. Patricia was Mom when Rosalind wanted to talk about academics or career planning. It was an imperfect solution, but it worked. Charlotte remained more reserved, still calling Serafina by her first name. But they developed their own traditions, monthly hiking trips and Sunday morning phone calls where they talked about books and politics and the small details of their daily lives. It wasn't motherhood in the traditional sense, but it was something real and meaningful. The hardest part was navigating holidays and major life events. Rosalind's 19th birthday was the first test. She insisted on having 2 separate celebrations, one with Serafina and one with the Hartwells, because she didn't want to force everyone together before they were ready. Charlotte's 18th birthday had been similar, though she had ultimately decided to have one combined party, which had been awkward but not disastrous. But for Thanksgiving, both families agreed to try coming together. Patricia and Gregory hosted at their sprawling home in the hills overlooking Portland. Serafina arrived early to help cook, mostly because she needed something to do with her hands to calm her nerves. She found Patricia in the kitchen, already surrounded by multiple dishes in various stages of preparation. "You didn't have to come early," Patricia said, though she didn't sound upset about it. "I have everything under control." "I know," Serafina replied, "but I wanted to help, and I wanted to talk to you without the kids around." Patricia paused in her chopping of vegetables. "About what?" "About us. About how we move forward from here?" Serafina took a deep breath. "I know we're never going to be friends, Patricia. We're too different, and there's too much pain between us. But I think we could be allies. For Charlotte and Rosalind's sake, if not for our own." Patricia set down her knife and turned to face Serafina fully. "I've been thinking the same thing. This situation is never going to be easy, but it doesn't have to be a war. Our daughters love each other. They're building a relationship that has nothing to do with us, and everything to do with who they are as people. We owe it to them to at least try to be civil." "More than civil," Serafina said. "We owe it to them to model what healthy conflict resolution looks like, to show them that it's possible to work through impossible situations with grace." Patricia smiled, a real smile, perhaps the first genuine one Serafina had ever seen from her. "Okay, let's try." The Thanksgiving dinner itself was actually pleasant. There were awkward moments, certainly, moments when conversations stalled or when someone said something that touched on sensitive territory. But there were also moments of real laughter, of connection, of something that almost felt like family. Watching Charlotte and Rosalind together, seeing how easily they had adapted to being sisters despite having grown up as strangers, gave Serafina hope. They were chatting animatedly about their college experiences, comparing notes on difficult professors and terrible dormitory food, occasionally pulling their parents into the conversation. "Rosalind is incredible," Gregory said to Seraphina during a quiet moment. "You've done an amazing job raising her." "Thank you," Seraphina replied, touched by the sincerity in his voice. "Charlotte is wonderful, too. You and Patricia should be proud." "We are, though I think most of who she is comes from herself, not from us. Kids have a way of becoming exactly who they're meant to be, regardless of their parents' plans." Seraphina thought about that often in the weeks that followed. She thought about nature versus nurture, about how much of who we are is determined by genetics versus environment. Charlotte had Patricia's determination and drive, but she also had Seraphina's love of the outdoors and Michael's quiet strength. Rosalind had inherited nothing genetically from Seraphina, but she had absorbed so many of her values, her passion for justice, her belief in standing up for what was right. Maybe it wasn't about biology or environment. Maybe it was about love, pure and simple. The love that Patricia and Gregory had given to Charlotte, the love that Seraphina had given to Rosalind. That love had shaped both girls into the remarkable young women they had become. As winter set in, Seraphina found herself in an unexpected place of peace. The situation was still complicated, still painful in many ways, but she had her daughter, even if that daughter wasn't genetically hers. She had a relationship with Charlotte that was growing deeper with each passing day. She had reached a kind of détente with Patricia that felt sustainable, if not warm. On New Year's Eve, Seraphina sat in her living room with Rosalind, watching the countdown on television. When the clock struck midnight, Rosalind turned to her and said, "Thank you." "For what?" Seraphina asked. "For not giving up on me when I was angry about all of this. For not letting the DNA test change how you felt about me. For still being my mom, even though you didn't have to be." Seraphina pulled her daughter into a tight embrace. "I will always be your mom. Always. Nothing could ever change that." "I know," Rosalind said, "and I love you for it." In that moment, Seraphina understood that the switch, as terrible as it had also been a strange kind of gift. Not because she was glad it happened. She would give anything to undo it, to have raised Charlotte from birth, to have the 18 years with her that she had lost, but because it had taught her something profound about the nature of family and love. Family wasn't just about blood. It was about the bonds you built, the moments you shared, the love you gave freely and without condition. Charlotte was her daughter because they shared DNA, because Seraphina had carried her for 9 months and given birth to her. But Rosalind was her daughter too, just as truly, just as deeply, because they had built a life together, because Seraphina had been there for every scraped knee and broken heart, and triumph and disaster. Both things were true. Both girls were her daughters. The switch had given her 2 daughters instead of 1, and while the price of that gift had been almost unbearably high, she was beginning to see the value in it. She reached out to Charlotte the next day, suggesting they meet for coffee. Charlotte agreed, and they spent 2 hours in a cafe near the university, talking about everything and nothing. As they were leaving, Charlotte hesitated, then said, "I've been thinking about what to call you." Seraphina's heart jumped into her throat. "Oh?" "I know you're my birth mother," Charlotte continued. "And I know you wish you could have raised me, but Patricia is my mom. She always will be. So I was wondering if it would be okay if I called you Sarah. It's short for Seraphina, but it's also different enough that it doesn't feel like I'm trying to replace Patricia." It wasn't what Seraphina had hoped for, but it was something. "I would be honored," she said, and meant it. Okay, Sarah, Charlotte said with a smile. I'll see you next week for our hike. As Serafina watched Charlotte walk away, she felt a complicated mix of emotions. Joy at this small step forward, grief for all that she would never have with Charlotte, gratitude for what she did have. It was all tangled together, impossible to separate, and she realized that was okay. Life wasn't neat, love wasn't simple, and family, especially her family, was messy and complicated and beautiful in its imperfection. Spring came again, marking a full year since Catherine's confession had upended everything. Serafina had taken to visiting Catherine's grave occasionally, not to forgive her, exactly, but to acknowledge the strange role she had played in bringing this new family configuration into being. She would sit on the grass beside the headstone and update Catherine on how everyone was doing, as if the nurse could somehow hear her from whatever came after this life. Charlotte called me Sarah today, she said during one of these visits. It's not Mom, but it's more than I had before. I'm grateful for it, even if it's not everything I wanted. The stone, of course, offered no response, but Serafina found a kind of peace in these one-sided conversations. Rosalind graduated from her freshman year with honors and announced her intention to major in environmental policy. She spent her summer interning with a nonprofit organization that advocated for sustainable water management, and she was passionate about the work in a way that made Serafina proud. She split her time between Serafina's house and staying with the Hartwells, which had initially bothered Serafina until she realized that Rosalind was building something important with Patricia and Gregory. They could offer her opportunities and connections that Serafina couldn't, given her more modest means, and Rosalind needed those things for the future she was building. Charlotte, meanwhile, had started at Stanford and was thriving. She had joined an environmental club on campus and was considering a major in sustainability studies. She and Serafina talked regularly, and their monthly hiking trips had expanded to include Rosalind, creating a ritual that belonged to the three of them alone. During one of these hikes, as they stood at the summit of a mountain overlooking the Cascade Range, Charlotte turned to both Serafina and Rosalind and said, "I've been thinking about something, about what we call ourselves." "What do you mean?" Rosalind asked. "We're sisters, obviously, but we're also more than that, because we have this unique connection that most siblings don't have. We were each raised by the other's biological mother. We're like mirror images of each other, living the lives we each should have had." Charlotte paused, searching for words. "I don't know what to call that, but I know it's special. We don't need a label for it." Serafina said gently, "Some relationships are too complex for easy categories." "I guess," Charlotte said, "but I want people to understand, you know? When I tell the story, I want there to be a word for what we are to each other." "Then make one up," Rosalind suggested. "Make up your own word for it." Charlotte considered this, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Okay, how about mirror sisters? Because we're each other's reflection in an alternate reality." "Mirror sisters," Rosalind repeated, testing out the phrase. "I like it." "So do I," Serafina said, feeling tears prick at her eyes. "You two are mirror sisters, and I get to be part of both your lives. I get to love you both in different ways, but with the same depth. That's more than I ever expected when this whole thing started." They stood together on that mountaintop, three people bound by an accident of fate, and held together by their choice to make something meaningful out of chaos. It wasn't the family any of them had planned for, but it was the family they had, and that was enough. As they hiked back down, Serafina thought about everything that had brought them to this moment. Catherine's mistake? Yes, but also the courage it had taken for her to confess. The DNA test that had confirmed an impossible truth. Patricia's fear and her eventual willingness to share, Gregory's steady support, Vivian's unwavering presence, Dr. Brennan's guidance through the therapy sessions. All of it had been necessary. All of it had led to this moment of peace and understanding. The legal aspects of the switch were never fully resolved. There was no lawsuit, no financial compensation. The hospital had offered both families a settlement to avoid litigation, but both Serafina and Patricia had declined. Money couldn't undo what had been done, and dragging everything through the courts would only cause more pain. Instead, they had agreed to move forward privately, to build something new out of the pieces of their shattered expectations. It wasn't easy. There were still hard days, still moments when old resentments flared up, still times when Serafina wished desperately that she could turn back the clock and prevent the switch from ever happening. But there were also good days. Days when all four of them got together and actually enjoyed each other's company. Days when Serafina would receive a text from Charlotte sharing something funny that had happened at school, or when Patricia would call to ask for advice about helping Rosalind navigate a difficult situation. They were building a new kind of family, one that existed outside traditional boundaries. It was messy and unconventional and sometimes painful, but it was also resilient and loving and proof that the human capacity for adaptation was nearly limitless. 2 years after Catherine's confession, on what would have been her 70th birthday, Serafina organized a dinner with both families. Patricia and Gregory, Charlotte and Rosalind, Serafina and Vivian all gathered at Serafina's house for a meal that celebrated not what had been lost, but what had been found. As they sat around the table, passing dishes and sharing stories and laughing at inside jokes that now included all of them, Serafina looked at each face and felt something she hadn't felt in years: wholeness. Not because everything was perfect, it wasn't, but because she had made peace with the imperfection. She had learned to hold multiple truths at once, to love fiercely even when it hurt, to build bridges instead of walls. "I want to propose a toast," Gregory said, raising his glass, "to Catherine Brennan, who made a terrible mistake that paradoxically gave us all something we didn't know we needed. And to this family, this strange, wonderful, complicated family that chose to come together instead of falling apart." They clinked glasses, and Serafina felt the weight of the past 2 years begin to lift from her shoulders. This was healing, she realized. Not the absence of pain, but the integration of it. The ability to hold sorrow and joy simultaneously, to mourn what was lost while celebrating what remained. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, Serafina stood in her garden, looking up at the stars. The night was clear and cold, and the sky was brilliant with light. Somewhere up there, she liked to think, Michael was watching. She hoped he approved of the choices she had made, the family she had built from the ashes of the one she had lost. "I did my best," she whispered into the darkness. "With both of them. I hope that's enough." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it the scent of jasmine and earth. Serafina closed her eyes and breathed deeply, letting the moment fill her completely. She had 2 daughters now, against all odds and expectations. Rosalind, who she had raised from birth and who carried her heart if not her genes, and Charlotte, who she had given birth to but barely knew, yet who was slowly, carefully becoming part of her life. Both girls were hers. Both girls were precious beyond measure. And while she would always grieve the years she had lost with Charlotte, she refused to waste the years she had left with either of them dwelling on what might have been. This was her family. Unconventional, complicated, sometimes painful, but hers, and she would spend the rest of her life making sure that both her daughters, her mirror sisters, knew they were loved completely, without condition, without reservation. The story of Seraphina Ashcroft didn't have a neat ending, because life rarely does. But it had a turning point, a moment when everything could have fallen apart but didn't. It had courage and resilience, and the slow, painful work of building something new from the rubble of the old. It had forgiveness, not for Catherine, but for herself, for Patricia, for everyone who had made mistakes along the way. Most importantly, it had love. Not the simple, uncomplicated love of fairy tales, but the messy, difficult, transformative love of real life. The love that persists, even when biology says it shouldn't. The love that creates family where none existed before. The love that says, you are mine and I am yours, and nothing can change that. That was the truth that Seraphina held on to as she went back inside, turned off the lights, and climbed the stairs to bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new moments of joy and sorrow, new opportunities to strengthen the bonds she had worked so hard to build. But tonight, she could rest in the knowledge that she had done the right thing, that she had chosen love over bitterness, connection over isolation, hope over despair. Her daughters, both of them, would grow up knowing that they were wanted, cherished, and part of something larger than themselves. They would know that family was more than genetics, that love was a choice you made every day, and that the most important bonds were the ones you built intentionally, with care and patience and unwavering commitment. And that, Seraphina thought as she drifted off to sleep, was worth every moment of pain, every sleepless night, every tear shed. Her daughters, her mirror sisters, were the greatest gift life had given her, even if they had arrived in the most unexpected way possible. The switch had been a tragedy, but from that tragedy had bloomed something beautiful, something that proved that love was always stronger than circumstance, always more powerful than mistake, always capable of redeeming even the most broken situations. That was Seraphina Ashcroft's story. Not a story of what was lost, but of what was found. Not a story of betrayal, but of redemption. Not a story of a family torn apart, but of a family that chose to come together again and again until the choosing became second nature and the coming together became simply the way things were. And in the end, that was more than enough.